Hey, this is Redditor, here I am, and I just want to show you, in my previous video, I showed how to embed a portrait into a model with the Footman model as a standard example. Now I'm going to show a slightly different way to do the same thing. The previous method will always work pretty much across the board, every single model you have, but what I'm about to show you on certain models will optimize them so that importing the portrait will happen more quickly. So for our case, what we're going to go to today is the Ancient of Lore. Now this model I chose because all of his face and his lips and all the things that you see moving in the portrait, when he moves his mouth and he moves his face, all exist pretty much exactly the same in the standard Ancient of Lore as they do in the portrait. So to that end, what we're going to do is we're going to import the portrait, but we're only going to import the background plane. We are not going to import the body geometry here, and when we do that, that's going to give us a model that looks pretty much just exactly the same, but it's going to be a smaller file size because it's going to have less geometry duplicated to be the portrait in the standard model. You have probably seen this several times in models on the Hive. Alright, so here I click on Ancient of Lore, and now we're going to start the process. So I'm going to hit Import from Workspace, and I'm going to choose the Ancient of Lore portrait. It'll take a second to load up. Let's go full screen. Alright, so we can clearly see the portrait model has the Ancient of Lore's face and all the geometry, and it has the Team Glow backdrop. So what we want is that backdrop. So we just uncheck Import this geoset on the geometry, so now we will only import the Team Glow backdrop. But wait, I know you're thinking, don't we want the animation so he moves his mouth too? Yes, we do. So we'll click on Animations here. This particular model has something called Broken Notes. I'm actually not exactly sure what this was, but it's something Blizzard left behind. If you're an archivist who likes that sort of thing, you could take a look at that. But it's of no use to us today, so we are just going to uncheck Import Broken Notes. We don't need that. And for the rest of these, we're just going to leave it as import as is. So we're going to import the portrait, we're going to import Portrait Talk, creating new animations in our current model, the Ancient of Lore. Now, as we get to the bone nodes here, what we want to do is just select all of them, except the glow plane bone. So except that glow plane background. Everything else, with all those selected, we're going to choose Import Motion to pre-existing. Now all of those nodes are going to automatically link to the corresponding nodes in the Ancient of Lore model because the Matrix Eater has figured out those links and it's figured out how similar the two models are based on the names, right? With that, we should be good to go ahead and import the glow plane and the camera. So we'll just leave those. And now we get to pretty much across the board in the portraits, the one part that takes really any effort, which is the visibility. Now the thing we want to think about, the Ancient of Lore has a huge number of geosets, right? It has 12 geosets. And so what you want to do is you want to look at those 12 geosets and figure out which of those do I really want to see in the portrait. I don't think we want like these rooted roots here. We don't really need those. We don't really need his legs. So probably the first thing we see that we really look like we want is going to be his face. Now I think also Geoset 4 here has got some of the team color and some of the extra stuff on like his staff and the back of his head there. You might not be able to see that in game, I'm not exactly sure, but let's go ahead and include that too. So he's got a good look to him, right? Geoset 3 and 4. So in order to accomplish that, what we're going to do here is we're going to select everything in the Ancient of Lore except not the portrait and not 3 and 4, because now we're going to treat 3 and 4 as though they were the portrait. And everything else we're going to choose not visible in the imported animation. So everything else will disappear in the portrait, similar to what we did with our Footman portrait in my previous example. Now for Geoset 3 and 4 and the portrait, what we're going to do is we are going to, well actually, let's be a little careful here. We want just the portrait. I was going too quickly. We want just the portrait's background to be not visible in all the existing Ancient of Lore animations. But the Geoset 3 and 4, they do need to be there in the Ancient of Lore standard animations. So that should be good. Now we'll click Finish, and let's try it in-game. For that, I'm just going to do a file save as. I'm going to save as binary and say Ancient Lore PT for Ancient Lore with a portrait, right? Something like that. Now we'll go in the game here, and we will import Ancient of Lore PT. We'll save, so we load the model in. And let's get Ancient of Lore. Cool. We're going to call him Ancient of Lore with PT. And we're going to click that model so that he will use it. And we'll go to Night Elf. And we'll place our custom Ancient of Lore, and we'll place the standard Ancient of Lore. And now we can compare and contrast them in the game. Alright, here we are in the game, and as you can see, we have the Ancient of Lore with PT and the Ancient of Lore. Now, interestingly enough, the Ancient of Lore's portrait actually looks slightly different from the Ancient of Lore portrait that we just created, because we just used the standard model, and his actual portrait face has a slightly different texturing, which is kind of curious. But to test our portrait, if we uproot him so that he will move his lips and speak to us, you can see that the lip movements are working just fine, both on the original Ancient of Lore and on the custom one right here. So that's an example, if you have a model that already has the rigging for the lips and such to move, how you can create a custom portrait baked right in using the same geometry, so it's going to take even less space.